Chiara said. "There never is with hell fever." Chiara had changed. He was no longer the stocky, cheerful man he had been on the Constellation, whose brown eyes had smiled at the world through thick glasses, and who had laughed and joked as he assured his patients that all would soon be well with them. He was thin, and his face was haggard with worry. He had, in his quiet way, been fully as valiant as any of those who had fought the Prowlers. He had worked day and night to fight a form of death he could not see and against which he had no weapon. "The boy is dying," Chiara said. "He knows it, and his mother knows it. I told them the medicine I gave him might help. It was a lie, to try to make it a little easier for both of them when the end comes. The medicine I gave him was a salt tablet. That's all I have." And then, with the first bitterness Prentice had ever seen him display, Chiara said, "You call me doctor. Everyone does. I'm not. I'm only a first-year intern. I do the best I know how to do, but it isn't enough. It will never be enough. What you have to learn here is something no Earth doctor knows or could teach you," he said. "You have to have time to learn, and you need equipment and drugs." "If I could have antibiotics and other drugs. I wanted to get a supply from the dispensary, but the Gurns wouldn't let me go." "Some of the Ragnarok plants might be of a value if a person could find the right ones. I just came from a talk with Anders about that. He'll provide you with anything possible in the way of equipment and supplies for research, anything in the camp you need to try to save lives. He'll be at your shelter tonight to see what you want. Do you want to try it?" "Yes, of course." Chiara's eyes lighted with new hope. "It might take a long time to find a cure. Maybe we never would. But I'd like to have help so I could try. I'd like to be able, some day once again, to say to a scared kid, 'Take this medicine, and in the morning you'll be better,' and know I told the truth." The nightly Prowler attacks continued, and the supply of ammunition diminished. It would be some time before men were skilled in the use of the bows and arrows that were being made, and work on the wall was pushed ahead with all speed possible. No one was exempt from labor on it who could as much as carry the pointed stakes. Children, down to the youngest, worked alongside the men and women. The work was made many times more exhausting by the 1.5 gravity. People moved heavily at their jobs, and even at night there was no surcease from the gravity. They could only go into a coma-like sleep, in which there was no real rest, and from which they woke tired and aching. Each morning there would be some who did not awaken at all, though their hearts had been sound enough for working on Earth or Athena. The killing labor was recognized as necessary, however, and there were no complaints until the morning he was accosted by Peter Bemin. He had seen Bemin several times on the Constellation, a big, soft-faced man who had attached much importance to his role as a minor member of the Athena Planning Board. But even on the Constellation, Bemin had felt he merited a still higher position, and his ingratiating attitude when before his superiors had become one of fault-finding insinuations concerning their ability as compared with his when their backs were turned. His resentment had taken new form on Ragnarok, where his former position was of utterly no importance to anyone, and his lack of any skills or outdoor experience made him only one worker among others. The sun was shining mercilessly hot the day Bemin chose to challenge Prentice's wisdom as leader. Bemin was cutting and sharpening stakes, a job the sometimes too lenient Anders had given him when Bemin had insisted his heart was on the verge of failure from doing heavier work. Prentice was in a hurry, and would have gone on past him, but Bemin halted him with a sharp command. "You, wait a minute!" Bemin had a hatchet in his hand, but only one stake lay on the ground, and his face was red with anger, not exertion. Prentice stopped, wondering if Bemin was going to ask for a broken jaw, and Bemin came to him. "How long," Bemin asked, anger making his voice a little thick, "do you think I'll tolerate this absurd situation?" "What situation?" Prentice asked. "This stupid insistence upon confining me to manual labor. I'm the single member on Ragnarok of the Athena Planning Board, and surely you can see that this bumbling confusion of these people," Bemin indicated the hurrying, laboring men, women, and children around him, "can be transformed into efficient, organized effort only through proper supervision. Yet my abilities along such lines are ignored, and I've been forced to work as a common laborer, a wood chopper." He flung the hatchet down viciously into the rocks at his feet, breathing heavily with resentment and challenge. "I demand the respect to which I'm entitled." "Look," Prentice said. He pointed to the group just then going past them. A 16-year-old girl was bent almost double under the weight of the pole she was carrying, her once pretty face flushed and sweating. Behind her, 2 12-year-old boys were dragging a still larger pole. Behind them came several small children, each of them carrying as many of the pointed stakes as he or she could walk under, no matter if it was only one. All of them were trying to hurry, to accomplish as much as possible, and no one was complaining, even though they were already staggering with weariness. "So, you think you're entitled to more respect?" Prentice asked. "Those kids would work harder if you were giving them orders from under the shade of a tree. Is that what you want?" Bemin's lips thinned, and hatred was like a sheen on his face. Prentice looked from the single stake Bemin had cut that morning to Bemin's white, unblistered hands. He looked at the hatchet that Bemin had thrown down in the rocks, and at the V-notch broken in its keen-edged blade. It had been the best of the very few hatchets they had. "The next time you even nick that hatchet, I'm going to split your skull with it," he said. "Pick it up and get back to work. I mean work. You'll have broken blisters on every finger tonight, or you'll go on the log-carrying force tomorrow. Now move!" What Bemin had thought to be his wrath deserted him before Prentice's fury. He stopped to obey the order, but the hatred remained on his face, and when the hatchet was in his hands, he made a last attempt to bluster. "The day may come when we'll refuse to tolerate any longer your sadistic displays of authority." "Good," Prentice said. "Anyone who doesn't like my style is welcome to try to change it, or to try to replace me. With knives or clubs, rifles or broken hatchets, Bemin. Any way you want it, and any time you want it." "I—" Bemin's eyes went from the hatchet in his half-raised hand to the long knife in Prentice's belt. He swallowed with a convulsive jerk of his Adam's apple, and his hatchet-bearing arm suddenly wilted. "I don't want to fight to replace you." He swallowed again, and his face forced itself into a sickly attempt at an ingratiating smile. "I didn't mean to imply any disrespect for you or the good job you're doing. I'm very sorry." Then he hurried away, like a man glad to escape, and began to chop steaks with amazing speed. But the sullen hatred had not been concealed by the ingratiating smile, and Prentice knew Bemin was a man who would always be his enemy. End of Episode 2.